Billboards. Have you been looking at billboards in Lakewood recently? The billboards which advertise goods and services. For example, lawyers. Very often law firms put up advertisements on billboards. Also casinos and maybe car dealerships. But what about candidates? No, not really. This is Lakewood. We have got a small-scale election for a few city councillors. You would not expect billboard advertisements for candidates for these elections. But this election seems to be different. You can see billboard advertisements for Philip Lindholm. Yeah, Philip Lindholm. Huge face of Philip Lindholm gazing at the traffic passing by. There was a billboard for Herr. I don't know what happened to that. It did get replaced by another advertisement. I think it was an advertisement for a law firm specializing in motorcycle injuries or something like that. So I don't know quite what the situation is with Herr, but certainly Philip Lindholm's face is very much above Lakewood. And this does remind us that Lindholm and Herr are putting a lot of effort into getting elected. I've been watching their campaigns, particularly the campaign of Philip Lindholm. The primaries, his yard signs, were all over Lakewood. Same to a lesser extent with Herr. Yeah, these two men, they desperately wanted to get elected. And there have been sort of meetings in private houses, and private citizens have hosted them, trying to get the message around, and they've been reaching out to various communities. And of course, both campaigns are quite well funded. I think they've raised over $30,000. And so, this does raise the question, why the desperation? I mean, is it the fact that Lindholm and Herr are desperate to get elected? Or perhaps there are people around them, people behind them who want them to be elected. And we just shouldn't forget what they are standing for. They're standing for part-time positions. This job, the city councillor, it's not very interesting. It's quite boring. I mean, you think about what you have to do to be a Lakewood city councillor. Well, you have to turn up to council meetings and you have to sit through them, and there can be long and boring discussions about municipal ordinances and zoning, and then you have to listen to presentations that go on for far too long, and you have to feign an interest in them, and then you've got the public comments. Public comments can just go on forever. Sometimes, usually people aren't bothered, just one or two public comments. But sometimes, you can have an hour of public comments and you've got to sit through it all. What do? You get tired, you get hungry, you get distracted. You perhaps feel that you've got no choice but to eat something or drink something, and then you're worrying about, are people going to notice you eating or drinking? And when the city council meeting is over, well, that's not necessarily the end of it. You sometimes have to go to local events, perhaps meetings with other municipalities, and then there are the ribbon cuttings. And what's it for? Well, it's for a measly $20,000 a year. So the question is, why? And worse still, you don't necessarily have much power. In most cases, it is the city bureaucracy that guides you. They tell you what to do, they tell you what's important, they have their own ideas, and you just vote on it, and you are basically rubber stamping it. So yeah, what is the point? Well, occasionally it can matter. The city council do sometimes vote on things, for example, zoning or development proposals, or whether or not to give developers a tax exemption. And perhaps, over time, if you have got a captured city council, a city council can be captured. Perhaps an interest group wants to take control. Over time, if the votes go in the same way, it can start to have an influence on the city, and the city can itself be captured. You capture the city council, you capture the city, and yeah, it does make a big difference. For example, if you've got untrammeled development, all over the place, it doesn't necessarily make life easier for Lakewood residents as communities get destroyed, they get built up. You've seen what's happened in Springbrook with the warehouses, and it may just be the beginning. And a lot of people are worried in Lakewood, but not developers. I mean, developers, they've got to make money. That is what is important. And it does seem that someone has got an agenda, and they are really pushing Lindholm and Herr, and the billboards are an example of this. And you can see how it works. So you have these two candidates, Lindholm and Herr. They are both Republicans. I mean, I know they say they're non-partisan, but if you look at the website of the Republican 28th district, you'll see that both Herr and Lindholm are listed. You can see their photographs on that website. So you have a unified bloc, and then the rest of the city council just fit in. You think about the city council. You've got, for example, Paul Bockey. I mean, he comes over at least as a nice, approachable guy, and he works for Pierce County, so development is important to him. And also you've got Ron Pearson, again another employee of Pierce County. Interestingly, Ron Pearson is the son-in-law of Donald Anderson, a former mayor of Lakewood, who has endorsed Philip Lindholm. But both these people, Bockey and Pearson, being employees of Pierce County, they are used to being part of a bureaucracy. They're not the kind of people that are going to rock the boat. And the same can be said for Patty Bell. I mean, she's a city councillor and she's another municipal employee. She works, I believe, for the city of Kent. So you then put in Herr and Lindholm, two people who have a clear agenda, which to an extent aligns with the views of Pearson and Bockey, and you have effectively a captured city council. And the question is that you have to keep asking, why is someone so desperate to take over the city council? I don't think that it is in the interests of Lakewood's residents. And bear that in mind the next time you see a billboard with Philip Lindholm's smiling face on it. Remember that he is not necessarily your friend. He does not necessarily represent the interests of Lakewood's wider community. He answers to those who back him, particularly the real estate and commercial interests. That's what matters. This campaign, which is really a rather extravagant campaign, is not about Lakewood's community. Do remember that. It's about control.